everybody sees the world in such a different way. And if we
Yeah.
can learn to respect each other for our differences and leverage our perspectives instead
Hmm.
of trying to make each other think like we do, right? I'm trying to make you more like me instead of understanding and making you a better you. It's just no wonder why there's so much tension and attrition in businesses.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. I'm your co-host, Lamar Bratton, along with the Enneagram coach for professionals, Keanu Trujillo. This is More Than Numbers, Enneagram for Business. Keanu, how you feeling this morning, man?
I'm glad to be back, Lamar. It's been a little while since we've been in the studio,
Man,
so to speak. So it's good to be getting an episode out. I had to do one solo. It was different without you, but and our plays kind of showed as well. We didn't do as much plays without you, so I don't know what's going on there.
what can I say? The people love them some Lamar. You know,
I think they love our dynamic.
I think it just shows that everyone needs a type one in their life. You know, and when it's not there, it's just something's missing.
Bro, if you keep talking like that, people are going to not want type 1 in their life.
Well, hey, before we get into the topic today, anything new going on in your world that you want to make sure the listeners know about?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to direct all of you there to our website, truestrategy.info. We're going to be launching our own Enneagram assessment very, very soon. So, of course, we'll let you know when that comes out, but I just want to let you all know ahead of time. We're going to have our own Enneagram assessment geared towards business and professionals and how to apply it. So we're really excited about that, right, Lamar?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can't wait to see that get launched out. And if you have not already signed up, make sure you go to that website because you won't want to miss it. Well, let's get into the topic today. Today's topic is no new friends. So before I give away what we mean by this, Keanu, when someone says no new friends, like what does that mean to you, and like how does that hit you?
For me, it makes me think about my circle. You know me, I'm very close with a certain select amount of people, and I like to build relationships with everybody, but those that I'm close to, that's a very tight-knit unit. So I do think about my natural tendencies and natural tendencies of a type 8 to really just have a close group, and that's it. And so that's what I think of first and foremost. What do you think of when you think of no new friends?
Well, first of all, I think of the Drake song, and I'm pretty sure that's where I got it from. No
Oh,
new
yeah, that too.
friends, no new friends, no new.
I
Way
forgot
back.
about that.
Right, right. But I think it really just fosters a culture of you can't trust anyone, and
Right.
just because of the backstabbing that's out there and all that other stuff. But man, it's crazy. The more people that I connect with, I'm not saying that like everyone has to be your best friend, but the more I just love on people and do people and share and collaborate, the more experiences we developed.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like we had an interesting experience in Albuquerque where we made a lot of new friends, I'd say.
Yeah.
Um, Share a little bit about like your experience over this past weekend in regards to this.
Yeah, I want to say, shout out to some of those new friends. Luke Ferragutti, I swear that's a real name, y'all. He's a professional pianist and an actuary. Very, very intelligent person. But Neville, he's also a musician from Dallas by way of London and then Kenya, right?
Kenya, then
Um,
London, born in Kenya,
Kenya, then
raised in
London,
London.
right? So we made a lot of, great connections and met some new friends. But, I'll be honest, going into new interactions, it just depends. But
Yeah.
most of the time, I'm not as excited.
Hmm.
Hold up. We got interrupted, didn't we? Did you lose me?
No, I heard you the whole time.
Bryce is okay. Bryce is trying to FaceTime us and it popped up. Hold up. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, shout out to our new friends, Neville out in Dallas, from Kenya through London. Our new friend, Luke, out in Omaha from Dallas, I believe. We made some really great connections at our best friend, Andrew's wedding. But, to be honest, going into new connections, sometimes I feel like, you know what, especially if I'm going to be around people that are familiar, I just want to hang out with mine. And I don't
Yeah.
really want to get to know anybody new. But we had that opportunity. And every time I do it, I definitely don't regret it. But
Right.
we all have a tendency of just gravitating towards what's familiar or what's comfortable. naturally. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today as well, as it pertains to business and connections.
For sure. And sometimes I feel the same way. Meeting new people can be a little bit, can give me lots of anxiety because I just have this natural tendency of wanting to look right, sound right, talk right, come off a specific way as a good person, and just worried about the judgy thoughts that can be going through someone else's mind. And it gives me a lot of stress. So, what could be a little bit different for you? I mean, we both can have troubles with it, but for you, it's a completely different reason than me. But it's interesting how that struggle still happens.
Well, each type.
Go ahead.
Well, each type has different reasons why sometimes they don't want to make new connections, or on the opposite side is why they do. But so maybe I'll run the wheel today, and we'll talk about each of them briefly.
That's my favorite thing is running the wheel. Like, it ain't nothing to me. But tell me, how does Enneagram help us build relationships?
For one, it helps you to understand that people just aren't the way they are, right? And when we don't understand people's personality or how they're set apart, we'll naturally think that, well, I just kind of like these kind of people without understanding why. And so when we understand why, then we can be very intentional with those that we surround ourselves with. One, with those that we're comfortable with, those that we enjoy, but also people that will challenge us, right? In these times, especially, everyone seems to find themselves in an echo chamber. I want to surround myself with people that think the way I do, that talk the way I do, that act the way I do, that believe the way I do. But that doesn't bring us much growth, right? That's a missed opportunity. So when we understand why we like certain people, it just helps us to accelerate those relationships and then also appreciate our likeness and our differences even more, right? Yeah. Lamar and I could not be more different in certain ways and then more alike in others. I really am the type of person that says, hey, this is what we want to do. We'll figure out how we're going to do it on the way there. And Lamar says, let's figure out how we're going to do it. And then we'll get there, and we complement each other in that way. But if I didn't understand and appreciate his personality, then I could start to think that, well, Lamar's just a hindrance on my growth or my opportunity, right? He's trying to hold me back, and that couldn't be further from the truth.
Right. It also makes me think of not having an echo chamber. It makes me think of the dynamic we have with our two other friends, Andrew and Bryce. But then we also just think differently. Some things fire us up more than others. Some of us are more patient. Some of us are more like ready to just, hey, we're here if you need us right off the bat. Some of it, it's really cool when you get that different dynamic rolling. Are you ready to run the wheel? Should we just go ahead and dive into it? Let's go through these types and see how they build relationships. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, sure. For sure. I mean, because really when we're, again, Enneagram in business, when we're trying to understand those that are around us, it's helpful to know why some people do gravitate more towards creating relationships and why others don't. But what I would say first are the general themes for each type is regardless of your type, you're built for community. So we know that to be true. You're not built to do this alone. So each type will have a yearning and a desire to build relationships, but for certain reasons, some won't. And I think maybe we'll start with the more, let's break it up like this. We're kind of randomize it. Those that are more prone to building relationships, being extroverted and loving on people, and those that are less, or the opposite of that.
I would love to know that. I would love to know that. So let's start off with the ones that aren't so prone to build new relationships.
Yeah. Well, this is probably a lesser number than those that are. There are some that are further on the edge of, really wanting to be introverted and not have to build a lot of relationships, and some that live for relationships, and then some that are kind of in the middle that vacillate. So know this, those of you that are listening, if you're a type 5 and you're like, I love relationships, know that, I'm not generalizing. We're just speaking from the knowledge that we have from the Enneagram. But with that, I would start with type 5s. Type 5s would probably be on the further end of the spectrum of not necessarily desiring relationships. They'll see them as necessary. But type 5s believe that the world is a bit too intrusive as it is. So when people try to get close to them, or people try to build a friendship, build a relationship, it has to be on the type 5's time and at their pace, not necessarily that of a type 8. And I think of a great friend of mine. He's a worship leader here at Elevation, Mike, but he's a type 5 and he's very to himself. And this is a culture where everyone kind of hugs each other, and, not so much now because, COVID or whatever. But when I came onto the team, everyone told me, hey, he's not a hugger, right? He's not that kind of person. And me being myself, I said, I'll
I'm gonna
fix
break
it.
down that barrier anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. I took it as a personal responsibility to fix it. So little by little, I would sit a little closer to him when we were doing work, and I'd give
Oh
him
my
a hug or
gosh.
whatever when I see him anyways, and he'd just like kind of clam up. But honestly, now he's one of my best friends, and but it is true, they feel like the world's a bit too intrusive, so they'll
Mm,
build relationships, but it's on their time, and they're not naturally going to look to build a relationship unless
mm,
there's really a purpose attached to it, as far as how it can benefit their business or their endeavors or whatever it may be. So they're
interesting.
a little bit more introverted. They're the person that's not going to necessarily want to hang out with you at the outings or at the business events. They kind of want to go into work, do their thing, leave at 5, leave me alone. Right. This is my time. Um,
Yeah.
but then let's go to the opposite end. We're just gonna have some fun with this. I would say then there's the 2, right? The 2 is very outgoing, very people oriented, very loving of people, really wants to get connected
Yeah.
to people at all times, all places. They're the one hosting the after party or the business event. They're the
Yeah.
one that wants to gravitate towards people, but also bring people into the fold.
What's interesting about it too is I imagine them just because they just love giving and they love obviously receiving at the same time. The more people that they surround themselves with, the more opportunities that is for.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
so true.
what on the blind side of things, when we can be so focused on like new relationships, like what are some of the downfalls of that?
Well, some of the downsides of that is that, you go an inch deep with 100 people instead of a
Wow.
mile deep with 10, right?
Mm,
And I'm the type of person that really likes to go deep in relationships with a select few people, but I'm a type 8, and that matters to me because I really want to build trust, right? I
mhm,
want to go deep in my relationships, but I'm not above having some, superficial connections with certain people because I just don't feel like maybe I can trust them. But I think a
mhm.
good representation of that, and this really is a strength for theirs, is the type 3, where they would fall closer to the 2 on that spectrum of being very extroverted and loving and moving towards people. But
Yeah.
they're the type of person that's going to make 100 connections in the room, know their name, know a little bit of their story, right? And everyone really feel kind of loved by them. And that's a strength. But depending on the other person's perspective, if you have a 3 that's really working the room, you can begin to feel like maybe you're part of the process, that, hey, well, they kind of meet
Mm.
everyone. They kind of love on everyone like this. Like, I'm not very special.
Oh,
Sometimes that can become a downside. But again, that's the perspective of the person that's on the other side receiving, because that's not
right.
necessarily the 3's intention. They're just
Yeah.
natural networkers. And we talked about that with Andrew in our podcast
Yeah.
not too long ago, who was a
That
type 3.
like that like for sure makes me think about Andrew. And like when I think about the times that I first met him, it's like dang, this dude is excited to see everyone. Like to the point where it's almost like, man, he makes everyone feel special. But then on the other side, it's like, oh, he just treats everyone like that, like no one's special, you
Right,
know?
right, right.
But as I get to know him further, it's just like, man, the dude just absolutely loves every single human being that he comes across. Like,
Right.
and that's just the way it is. And it's easy for us to take that the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, he said it in our last podcast, right? He genuinely loves people. So we're
Yeah.
not going to say that he's disingenuous, but some people can perceive him in that way,
Yeah.
right? And perception is reality. Some people may see the 5 as an introverted jerk. But that's not the
Yeah.
case, right? They just, relationships aren't as important to them.
Yeah.
So then we kind of have some that lie in the middle.
I had one to throw out there.
Go ahead.
Um, obviously the people that are close to me in my life have several 6s in my life. And to me, all 3 of them that I can think off the top of my head, lean a little bit more towards the reserved, introverted side of things. New people do scare them, but once they are attached to you, they are not going anywhere. So I'd
Right.
love to hear more like your take on that.
Yeah, I was gonna, say the 6 probably it lands a little bit more closer to the 5 as well, where they're
Mm,
not going to necessarily always be the first to engage in a conversation or go step out and build a relationship. But once the relationship is built, they're going to become your best friend, right?
mm,
So that's where the 6 kind of leans more so on that side. And then I think everything but all the other types kind of fall a little bit more in between The 4 as well can lean closer to being a little bit more introverted and not moving towards building relationships. But at the same time, they can find themselves on the other side. So I would say the 5 and the 6 are more introverted or more closed off when it comes to building new relationships. The 2 and the 3 are more extreme on building relationships, and then all the other types kind of fall somewhere in between there. So the 1, the 4, the 7, the 8, and the 9. And it really just depends on the setting. But, going from there, I kind of want to jump into what that means for your business.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you. So what does that mean for a business leader or a salesperson knowing this?
Well, it really depends on the culture that you're creating, right? What are your intentions as far as the culture that you want to create in your business? Because you may say, you know what, I want to create a culture of nothing but super driven and energetic and outgoing people, right? And that's okay if that's your intention. But if that's not your intention and you're saying, hey, I want to build a very well-balanced team. I want a team that balances each other out, get different perspectives. The Enneagram can bring a lot of light to that, to understand, well, you may want that. However, you're really building a whole lot of yourself because we gravitate towards what's familiar. So this has a lot to do with hiring and recruiting, because in hiring and recruiting, you're going to be prone to hiring people that think and act and believe just like you do. And that's a great thing. But if that's left unchecked, it can become a liability. It can become a weakness, because now we're not bringing any other type of perspectives into that circle. And so let's imagine if you
got the same blind spot.
Right, exactly. So imagine, if you will, a business leader or business owner who's a type 8, and his recruiter is a type 8, and his leadership team is filled with a bunch of 8s. Well, there's probably going to be a lot of churn and attrition on that team, because they're going to burn through people. It's going to be a grinder, because they're all going to think, well, people should be built to run at this pace. And that's just not true for most other types. For an 8, it's natural. But on the other side of things, if you have somebody that, say, is a leader that is, let's think of a number that we don't talk about as often, a leader that is a 6, right? A 6 is going to be more methodical in their approach. They're going to be a little bit more playing, the devil's advocate. When, let's say, we have a 6 CEO and they've kind of surrounded themselves with people that think similarly, then they're going to be slower to market with their ideas, right? But then you throw an 8 in the mix, or a 3 or a 7, and they're like, let's just go, guys, let's go make it happen. Then they're going to be prone to call them reckless. And they'll say, they just don't get it, right? They're reckless. They don't want to go through the process. And that's not the case. You just have a bunch of 6s that are like more reserved in that. So being able to just really pull back the veil on teams and see where the tensions lie according to Enneagram types. That's one of my favorite things to do, is do team sessions where we can figure out, hey, what's really going on underneath the surface as to why we get along, or why we do get along, and let's be then intentional about those connections, and let's accelerate our growth by working to our strengths.
Right. No, that's huge. When you think about a few different types, like, which ones do you feel like have the most tension with each other?
Well, I'm going to, say the obvious one first. I would say an 8 and a 1.
It's funny that we're best friends.
If people would have saw us, if people would have seen us at Holy Cow Burger on Friday night last weekend, they would have thought we couldn't stand each other. And we won't talk about the subject matter, but we'll say that some people that were some of our new friends were kind of sitting there like, are they mad? And we weren't, but we are very stubborn. We're very passionate. We're very aggressive. And so because of that, the 1 wants to do things right. The 8 wants justice. And really, it's the same thing. You just have a different way of getting there. For me, it's like, hey, let's kick down the door. And you're like, let's, figure out how to pick the lock. Right. And we both want to get through the door, but
can you at least let the people know who won that argument at Holy Cow?
Lamar won that argument at Holy Cow. I'm not too prideful to admit it. I would say a 1 and an 8. I would also say, man, it's tough to talk about which ones have more glaring conflict, because they all have their own tensions that they carry into every interaction and every relationship, right? But off the top of my head, I would say an 8 and a 1. I would also say, and I don't want to say an 8 and and everything, but this is definitely true because the 8 is very aggressive and confrontational. Maybe some other types. Let's say a 7 and a 6.
Okay.
A 7 and a 6, because the 6 is the devil's advocate, worst case scenario thinker. They want to plan and process. And I think of watching Michael Scott on The Office. I sent you the clip not too long ago where Jim wanted to make the pros and cons list, right? And Michael's like, oh my gosh, another list. I know I can't stop you from thinking, right? It has to be I think of Michael Scott in that scenario being a 7 and Jim being a 6, right? Like, let's plan it. Let's make sure it's okay. And that can become very draining on a 7. However, on the other side, the 7's ambition and zeal can become draining for the 6. So just some that are very opposite that stand out as well. I would say a type 4 and a type 3. And it's funny because they neighbor one another, and they of course can take on wings of each other, all of these types. But the 4 and the 3 as well. The 4 wants to be very authentic, right? The 4 wants to be unique and special, and the 3 is the chameleon type, right? They'll take on whatever success looks like, or whatever they need to be successful in the moment. And the 4, for them, that can become draining because hey, you're kind of a phony, right? Don't you want to be unique? Right. And then the 3 would say, well, 4, you're kind of emotional, like you need to you need to temper that. But it's again, it's just all, I think, as we're talking through some of these more glaring tensions, it just brings light to the fact that everybody sees the world in such a different way. And if we can learn to respect each other for our differences and leverage our perspectives instead of trying to make each other think like we do, right? I'm trying to make you more like me instead of understanding and making you a better you. It's just no wonder why there's so much tension and attrition in businesses.
Yeah, most definitely. I'd love to wrap this thing up with 2 thoughts. Why is it important to continue to cultivate the relationships we have and build new ones?
First and foremost, a little plug for coaching with the Enneagram, but the Enneagram helps to eliminate a lot of drag in building relationships. It helps us to build relationships much faster, right? And so the Enneagram helps us to build relationships in a week that would have taken months or even years to cultivate because we didn't understand one another. So it helps us to enhance those relationships. But to speak to your first part of the question, it's helpful to continue to cultivate the relationships that you already have because those people already understand you, and you can run at a very fast pace without having to explain, right? I'm looking now to build the True Strategy team. I'm bringing other coaches onto True Strategy, and there are some that are going to join the team that will have to stop and kind of explain, hey, yes, Keanu's an 8, but let's also, they'll have to learn to understand me outside of my number, right? I'm more than the number. Right. And whereas you understand me. So there are a lot of things that I don't have to explain as well. My chief marketing officer, he's an 8. So there are a lot of things that I don't have to explain. He just gets it. And that's the importance of cultivating long-lasting relationships because of the context, because of the history. A lot of things don't need explanation. We can just run and understand each other and get to new heights and new levels in our relationships or in our businesses.
Yeah. Keanu, I've noticed that you've made a lot of new relationships this year. So I think that's the reason why I want to get that answer from you. How have these new relationships been impactful for you in your life just here in 2020?
What are you getting at?
I don't know. I'm just meeting new people. It's a great thing. And I've noticed that, just with you meeting with you've got introduced to the Benham brothers. I don't know. I just feel like you've made a lot of new relationships this year that have sparked business ideas, that have gotten your foot in the door to coach certain markets. I would just love to just hear your take on how the new relationships have been impacting you.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's awesome. Well, what I think of first and foremost is that similar to development, a podcast, a book, a teaching, a course, you don't usually take all of the content there's one thing that you can take from each, right? And it adds to this house that you're building of your development. The same thing in your relationships. There are certain things that people bring naturally that is just another, cinder block that adds to the building and in your development, where you would have had to take in a course or get a degree to understand this thing that someone in a relationship can teach you in a day, a week, or a conversation. And so it's so important to continue to cultivate new relationships. Now, for some of you, that's going to be easier than others. However, all of us, even the most extroverted of us, have to continue to build and cultivate relationships because one, as believers, we know that God uses people to provide resource. God has always used people, even in the person of Jesus, to provide salvation. So he's always going to use people to give you what you need. But on the other side, as far as business goes, continuing to challenge your thinking, continuing to expand your worldview so you don't become so isolated. I think of the town that I grew up in. It's a town of 2,000 people in northern New Mexico with one stoplight. And living there, growing up there, I had a very, very narrow view of the world. Right. Yeah. And now I have friends from all over the country and now, from different parts of the world, and they help to just bring a different perspective. So as it pertains to your business, it's always helpful to continue to challenge your thinking, continue to challenge the way you process or the way you do things with new people. So that way they can bring light to those blind spots. We just don't know what we don't know. And every person is uniquely gifted to bring another piece to that puzzle or another brick to build a house.
100%, man. Way to bring that home, dude. Like opening up your perspective, right? Such a great analogy, like from small town to now seeing the world a lot more. There's so much more for us to see and experience out there. And people are a huge way that we can be experiencing that. So don't stretch yourself thin, but also don't close yourself off. And at the end of the day, if you're still feeling like, man, but it just doesn't feel right inside of me, guess what? You got Keanu Trujillo, the Enneagram coach for professionals, to help you understand your inner self so you can get connected with people on a much deeper level and meet other people as well.
Yeah. Challenge yourself and challenge your circle. After you listen to this, I always like to leave you with something practical because I'm a very practical person. So challenge yourself with those that you're surrounding yourself with. Really take an audit of the kind of people you're surrounding yourself with. Not to say that that's right, wrong, or indifferent, but awareness is key. So challenge yourself with those that you have leading your businesses, those that are your closest friends, those that you call upon, your mentors. Begin to challenge yourself in figuring out, do I have myself trapped in an echo chamber? Where can I grow? Or where can I continue to maximize my strengths?
Love it. Thanks, Keanu, man. It's always fun. I'm so glad that we're back.
We have some others joining us in the studio as well very soon. We are going to hit a run of about 4 to 6 weeks of some really amazing guests that are, one, familiar with the Enneagram, but also very successful in business. We have the Benham brothers joining us on the podcast. We have Beth and Jeff McCord from Your Enneagram Coach, founders of Your Enneagram Coach. Larry Hubaka, who helped create the creative culture at Elevation Church, and many more that you're going to love to hear from, that are business owners, that are professionals, that can speak on how the Enneagram has impacted them and just give you all some wisdom. So join us over the next 4 to 6 weeks. We're going to have guests with us and you guys are going to love it.
But hey, once again, this has been More Than Numbers, Enneagram for Business. I'm your co-host, Lamar Bratton, along with the Enneagram Coach for Professionals, Keanu Trujillo.